Hello and welcome to Vantage Point. I'm Marcia Boyles, and as always I am joined by my partner in this venture, Kathleen Taylor, who is our social worker, clinical social worker at the medical center. Kathleen, I think we have chosen a very interesting topic today, and one that's going to be relevant to a number of residents here. We're talking about coping with caretaking, and specifically, or caregiving, specifically that with partners and spouses in terms of caregiving. We started this topic to a certain degree in our That's Life program, which we did 2 weeks ago, in which we talked about the kinds of services and help assistance that we can provide both to our extended family members and to friends and neighbors here at Green Spring. So we began the topic, I think. We began the subject at that time. Now today you'll be talking primarily about the caregiving stresses. I will be talking briefly, I might add, about being the recipient of caretaking and those stresses as well. So let me turn it over to you.
Oh my goodness, yeah, this is such an important topic, I think. I think last show when we were talking about the complexities and difficulties of being in a situation where you feel responsible for another person, yes. But not necessarily your spouse. Caregiving, I think most of the time we're talking about, in our community, certainly, that the spouse is the caregiver, right, within the care partnership, and that just brings with it so many other layers of complexity, really. The marriage relationship, just the fact that the person, they have been together probably for very many years, so that responsibility, that commitment is so strong, and so
we see a lot of it here.
You do see a lot of it here. And I think, just to start out, just to say that a caregiver is doing a remarkably difficult thing. And they're devoted, they're caring, they're committed. But they are also, and this is kind of the topic of our conversation today, is they're also at risk. And so this is kind of maybe an attention getter here for people to think about, but caregivers are very vulnerable from a psychological and a physical standpoint.
Physical as well.
Yes, absolutely. And research has shown that with a caregiver, that person has a 63% greater possibility of dying than their non-caregiving peer group.
Whoa, yeah. The mortality rate is that much greater.
That much greater. And related to that is, the studies that have been done that show that the stress hormones in a caregiver are elevated 23% higher than what would be in the normal population. And so what we know about stress, because we've talked about that a few times, is that it really produces a lot of wear and tear on the body, that it makes people much more susceptible to diseases like heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, all kinds. I mean, your whole body takes a hit when you're under stress. So I think that, and then along with it, the emotional impact, looks like studies are showing that caregivers are 6 times more likely to have signs of depression or anxiety than their non-caregiving
Is that
peers.
right?
So all that to say
6 times
that there is a lot of stress associated with doing what is coming from a place of love and caring. So how do we help a caregiver to be that person that they want to be there for their spouse, but also to stay healthy and take care of themselves as well?
All right, so of being effective and healthy are the two objectives here. Okay.
Physically healthy and emotionally healthy.
All right. How does that happen?
How do we do that, huh? Well, it sort of is the same kind of approach that we were talking about when we were talking about people working, you know, trying to know how to respond to someone who is, you know,
Who needs your help?
Kind of, you know, putting them in a situation where they feel like they need to be able to provide certain things for that person. And again, in a spousal relationship, I mean, you're together, you are living together, you are, you know, have probably had, you know, a long 50+ relationship possibly, so that that those expectations are high. But what I feel happens, and I think I alluded to this in the That's Life program as well, is that sometimes we lock in to the shoulds that we have in our heads, you know, the ways that we feel we need to be. And a lot of those are about, you know, kind of being the best, you know, doing the most. Being able to fix something. So I you know, have a list actually of things that I thought about when I thought about what caregivers might have in their heads. But I think, you know, that it's like I'm the only one that can help this person. I have to be strong. If I'm not strong, I'm a failure. I'm not a quitter. I'll disappoint my spouse, my family, myself, if I'm not able to do this.
I won't make his or her life better.
I won't be able to fix it.
Won't be able to fix it. There you go.
Right. And so, so that, I mean, imagine, you know, that those thoughts being in your head, you know, connected to the fact that this person, you know, is your love. It's the person that you know, promised long ago when you made your marital vows that you were going to take care of them. So how do we help a person get a little bit more flexibility in how they interpret, you know, their role as a caregiver, that allows them to see that they maybe aren't the only one that can do it?
All right.
For one thing.
All right.
Or
that would be a huge step.
That would be a huge step, because that involves accepting help, perhaps.
Yes. Turning over some of your shoulds, your responsibility. Yeah.
That's right. Well, I guess at some level, if that feels like failure, then it's admitting failure, that I can't do it all myself. And you know, depending on the person, that can be really difficult. So, or you know, the idea of being a quitter, you know, that I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep doing this no matter what. Or the fact that that love and caring that you have for that person equates with you feeling like you have to put them in front of everything else, including yourself. So that you almost end up feeling like you need to sort of sacrifice yourself and your own well-being.
And in a very literal sense, people do.
Yes, since we know what happens. Yeah, absolutely. So remember, I was talking last time about the whole either-or kind of conundrum that people get into when they're stressed out, that they see things in very black or white terms, either-or. So it's like, either I am this person who is everything, or I am not the person who is everything. But if we can change that way of seeing things so that it's not either or, there's a middle ground, you know, so can you be that devoted caregiver and still let yourself have some help?
All right, so it's changing your own expectations of yourself.
Yep, or what you think other people's expectations are of you.
Okay.
Which is another thing too.
All right.
Yeah, do your children, you know, really, you feel like your children would be disappointed in you if you didn't, you know, come through and
provide everything.
Right, right. Would you look weak, you know, would you look, you know, I mean, heck, we just carry with us so many of those feelings of, putting ourselves, at a place where we really might not succeed,
Kathleen, do you see a gender difference in terms of the way people react and act?
I think women and men interpret things a little bit differently, but I think both of them have their own both genders have expectations about what their role and responsibilities are in terms of their relationship with their spouse.
You and I have talked in the past about a difference in gender expectations, but the fact that particularly the generations at Green Spring have had relatively rigid kinds of expectations, I think, gender expectations.
Yeah.
Gender role expectations.
Yeah, I think that's true. But they sort of both all amount to the same thing, which is they get themselves in a place where they can't feel like they have a way out.
Yes.
I mean, the man, may feel like, that whole riding in on your white horse kind of thing, the rescuer,
taking care of the family,
being the strong one, being the one who has to carry on. I mean, that's a hardcore gender expectation.
Yes.
That is, happily changing now, but it's
definitely.
It's been a long time coming. And the same with women, where the women might feel like that whole idea of devotion and sacrifice,
right?
Yeah, will come into play a little bit more, and also, thankfully, those expectations are changing
yes,
too.
Exactly.
But that said, it still does create expectations that are hard to live up to, and can just create. Imagine in a caregiving relationship, this is every day, 24/7.
Yes.
Week after week, month after month. So the amount of stress that piles up if you don't allow yourself some ability to take yourself off the hook, to a certain extent, with those expectations is going to be really, really seriously detrimental.
Is there a difference in terms of expectations and roles and the degree of stress in terms of the type of disability on the part of the spouse?
I would say probably there might be, but I think that there also might be just some individual variations that we, I think we might say, I guess, if you're giving more physical care, if the person has more need to, more mobility issues, more kinds of personal care needs, that's one thing. If you're helping care, or if you're caring for somebody that has dementia. Or a cognitive kind of disorder, then the person may be physically okay, but there's a lot of things that need to be done just to keep them oriented and kind of on track.
Yes, the roles would be somewhat different.
They're different, but I don't think from a stress level they're necessarily any different. I think that they just look different.
They would.
Yeah.
How, when you talk to folks, what kind of advice are you giving them?
Well, I keep saying I never give advice.
Oh, gosh. You must be the only person in the world that doesn't give others advice.
I know, I don't. I don't professionally give advice. Personally, I might give advice.
Okay.
But the thing is, really, it is trying to help the person to explore all of these things that they have in their heads, all of the self-talk that they have about how they should be and what they should be doing, and
recognizing them for what they are.
Yeah, to help them see that they aren't locked into that. That they're able to be able to see things in a different way. So, for example, that I have to do it all myself.
Yes.
I think that
I'm the only person that can do it.
And I think that's the correlation that is probably making it that much harder is that I'm the only one who can do it right. So it's not only doing it, it's doing right. I'm the only one who really knows what my wife or my husband needs.
Yes.
Nobody else can do it the same way as I can. And I'm sure while that's true, another person can come in and do it in a different way, which can be equally good. So
in some cases, if it's a professional coming in, they can actually do it better.
Right. And well, they can do it. Yeah, they can do it. They can certainly, with some of the physical care needs, certainly do it in a different way. And I think that also the thing that we talked about when we were kind of preparing for this was the idea of how being that hands-on caregiver all the time really changes the relationship.
Yes,
in not a good way.
Is it invariably a negative kind of change?
I don't think that it's invariably. I don't ever think that anything is always that way. But I think that what it does is, I think that if you become necessarily focused on the physical care, there's just a need for a lot of physical care, or a lot of different kinds of care related to the person's situation, then that becomes your focus.
Yes.
So it's more you become focused in on the tasks that you have to do to care for that person, whether it's making sure that they have their medicines, they have their
the
shower,
practical aspects,
the practical, or safety issues, all of the different things that you would worry about in keeping that person okay. But what the trade-off is that you really lose the energy and the even time to be able to do the things that really nourish your relationship. To be able to just sit down and look over old pictures, or share a favorite movie, or listen to some music, because you're always just so focused on what you have to do.
And that part of the relationship clearly is critical.
It is critical.
And enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that even more than critical probably is the fact that it feeds, the joy of the relationship, that has been longstanding. So, a lot of times when I do talk to people about the idea of kind of letting go a little bit of the control is another thing.
Right.
I need to be in control. That if you allow a professional caregiver, for example, to take on some of those responsibilities, the direct care responsibilities, that does give you the ability, gives you and your spouse the opportunity to just be there together with each other, and that's really important, to not lose track of that.
Yes, I would certainly think so.
So that that's definitely probably one of the biggest things, is just helping people to sort of change their expectations of what they feel they should be doing, to be able to allow a more balanced approach.
I would think it would be a huge relief to both to be able to let some of the physical aspects of it go to an aid or whatever.
It's scary, which is part of the reason why people find it difficult.
Scary
and bringing a stranger into your home, for example, or if the decision is to have the spouse move to a care setting like Garden Ridge, or assisted in one of the care settings there, it's scary. You have to trust that other person, the caregivers, the professional caregivers, can meet your partner's needs.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, it's a really, really tough decision. It can be a relief, but I think it takes a while to feel relief. I think for a while it feels just scary, and you're doing a lot of second guessing about whether it's the right thing to do or not.
Whether they're getting adequate care.
Yeah, exactly. I think that you're going to talk a little bit about some of your insight as being a care recipient, and how that is too, because I think that relates in another way that I'd like to follow up with.
Yes, I think it's highly pertinent here. I was in Garden Ridge and Hospital for many, many months this past year, and was certainly a recipient. I had, friends and extended family that all came and gathered and provided certainly emotional help and so forth. Let me preface this by saying, as a Agatha Christie fan, I well remember years ago reading as Miss Marple became aged and infirm, she hired a girl from the village to be her helper. And the girl was bright and wanted to be helpful and was kind. But as Miss Marple constantly said, she did everything just a little bit off, just a little bit wrong.
Oh, definitely.
When Miss Marple would say, please, pull that weed, she would pull the weed next to it, or maybe she'd even pull a flower. But it was just never quite right.
Exactly.
And I remember that made quite an impression.
Right.
I think in reality, the frustrations center on things not being done just the way you want them to be. If you have an itch on your back, they're never quite in the spot when they go to rub it that it itches.
Right, because you can't do it yourself.
You cannot do it yourself, and that's the other part of the frustration, of course, is not being able to do it yourself, not being in control.
Exactly.
So it's those two things that I think were the primary frustrations.
Yeah, yeah.
And from a practical standpoint, small things, if the pillow was in the wrong place, you might have several hours of discomfort.
Right.
So, I mean, small things really did make a difference. Yeah. But the honest truth is that what really made the difference was the love and attention and caring. The physical touching and caring became increasingly important, I discovered. One friend brought her dog over to lie on my bed, snuggle up, which was very dear. So the physical part, certainly the emotional part, providing phone calls, visits, including your phone calls, good friends, providing support and love.
Right.
So I think those became increasingly important.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's right. I think that, sometimes people focus on the specifics because that's what they have control over.
Right.
The other part is a little bit harder to know how to make that person happy at some level, But just knowing that being able to just have somebody with you, not fussing around with the pillows necessarily, but just sitting down and having a chat is actually that much more important.
Just expressions of concern and love.
Yeah.
One friend came and held my foot.
That wasn't me, I guarantee you that.
It was not you. Which I thought was really rather dear for maybe a half an hour.
Yeah.
So and those visits and expressions of love were just they made all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But also to your point, you do bring up a good example of another complication in a care partnership, because when you are receiving the care and you really wish you weren't, you wish you
didn't have to.
Wish you were that person that was able to get up and do for themselves. Then you do get frustrated, and you do get upset, and you do get irritable, and you
depressed.
do get depressed, and you get short-tempered, and you may bark at your caregiver.
Good. That's an excellent point. Yes, you do. You become very irritable.
Yeah. Yeah. And here
and you also then end up focusing on the physical.
Oh, okay. That's kind of the easier thing to complain about.
Exactly.
I guess.
Exactly.
But I think that is so difficult then for the care partner, who is doing as much as they possibly can to make this person feel better, and they're kind of not responding in kind. They're not feeling necessarily grateful at that moment.
That's right.
And so that adds to just how complicated that whole relationship dynamic becomes.
Yes, you really, in a sense, the recipient then is reinforcing the feeling of the caregiver from the standpoint of, you're saying, you're not doing this right, you're not helping me, you're not, you know, and why aren't you?
Yeah, yeah, and so that has to be dealt with too at some level. Is, you know, some people, if that happens, they'll just keep trying harder, while they're just getting more and more stressed and internally more upset themselves,
Exactly.
which could then, you know, add, you know, spill over into the relationship, because I mean, you can only
It would
take
have
that
to.
for so long. So all of that just building stress and frustration over these expectations that you're never going to meet. At some point, you know, I just go, you really have to rethink this.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is not working for anybody. And that's when you really, you know, want to talk to the person about being able to modify and adjust what their thoughts are, to allow for help, to allow for support, allow for self-care, allow for time to go away and you just get away, but also
Yes.
do something, you know, that is helping you refresh yourself. You know, just so many different aspects of taking care of yourself that allows you then to come back and take care of that other person too. It's like that whole thing that we talk about in the airplane where something happens, the cabin decompresses and the oxygen drops in front of you, and the little sign says, before helping anybody else, put your oxygen on yourself first. You got to put, as a caregiver, you have to keep yourself in good shape. That's the priority, and then you can do as much as you can. But even then, you know, you have to realize you'll never be able to do as much as you think you should be able to do.
And as the recipient, I think there is a gratefulness to the professionalism of an aide, for example, that knows how to do things. And I think, you know, you can yell at the aide, or you could be crabby with the aide, but it's a very different thing than being crabby with your spouse or partner. And so I think that's healthy for both.
It is, because if you can kind of decrease some of that stress to where, if you can, you know, anytime you can avoid a situation where everybody's anxiety level is just, you know, ramped up, and you're just fighting at some levels, however that looks.
And you're fighting about probably very practical, relatively minor kinds of things.
Yeah, which have completely different symbolic import.
Yes.
You know, so even though you're fighting about, you know, or you're, you know, having a conflict about something that seems very minor, it has to do with, you know, these people coming together, the other person one person wishing that they didn't have to have this help and that they could just have the life that they've always had. The other person incredibly sad that that's the case and wanting to make it better, but not really knowing how. And so there's that whole, you know, the whole partnership, the whole couple's ability to adjust their thoughts around a new reality too, which is also like a huge deal.
Yes, it would be a totally a new dynamic in that kind of case. I have friends that are in caregiving situations, and they're doing things like meditation, which I think is terribly healthy, and going out, you know, for lunch and
all those self-care things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just, you know, anything that anybody can recall in terms of stress reduction, exercise, you know, is really, really good. Making sure that you have some good unbroken sleep, which might be a problem depending on what your care partner's needs are.
Yes.
But you know, finding a person that you can talk to about what's going on, you know, in a truthful manner.
Yes.
You know, seeking professional help, you know, to be able to help you with the physical care, but also with your own emotional care.
Yes,
as well.
I would think that would be, I think being able to talk to somebody would be critical.
Yeah, I think just recognizing that you really do have to think very carefully about what's in your head, what's driving you. Your intentions are pure, But you know, the way that
Yes.
things get a little bit muddied are those expectations that set you up for failure. You know, that set you up for just increased stress, and not an ability to kind of adjust to the reality in a constructive, functional way.
Well, and as we've talked about in other programs, the minute the stress level gets that high, then we're not really thinking very clearly.
You're not thinking anyhow. So if whatever people can do, they can use their breathing exercises,
Yes.
they can use their meditation. I think that people have some pretty good ideas, but getting away is really important. I think that you know, I see it's almost time for us to go, but I think that the final thing to kind of point out is that sometimes these caregiving relationships can become incredibly isolating.
Oh, yes.
That you
Yes.
are just in your apartment with your spouse. You're not giving yourself
24 hours a day.
Neither one of you have a break from each other.
Right.
And it just, you know, is too much. And recognizing that at that point, you know, sometimes it might be really hard to even realize that you can't break away. So hopefully you have a friend there's somebody else that's able to say, hey.
Right.
So anyhow, we're done for today, huh?
Well, I see that we are. The 30 minutes always go very quickly.
Zooms by.
Kathleen, I think this was very helpful, and I think both of us would be interested in having folks talk to us about, you know, their reaction to some of the comments.
I know. We always love that. So,
yeah, we do.
Whatever
Both of us do.
feedback we get will be great.